missing the whole point. I was like, the average parent doesn't care or really need to know the nuanced distinction, right? If we are in a center with a child that has like SIB 215 times a day, we're going to want that distinction. But for the average parent, I don't know that that matters. And not to water down the science, but I think also, why are we not making this accessible to all parents? People need something. And sometimes behavior analysts can be like, great, I'll be back in 6 weeks. And you have a teacher or a parent who's drowning and can't wait 6 weeks. And from my lens, if I don't give you a little bit, you might actually make it worse. So why don't I help you to understand this in the most basic terms so we can at least head in the right direction?
Hey everybody, welcome to Cooperant Learning. I'm Kyle Steery. It's fall outside, and I'm staring out at a bunch of trees with leaves falling, and the weather may become 90 degrees. It may drop to 0 degrees. I don't know what to expect, but I wore a sweatshirt and I'm very hot right now, so we're gonna roll with that. But I've got some awesome guests here today. First, my co-host, Dr. Sparks. He's on location, not in his typical locale or going on with you. Where are you at?
We're at the Community Mental Health Association of Michigan Conference up in beautiful Grand Traverse Resort, northern Michigan. And there was ice on my car this morning, to tell you how it is up here. But yeah, don't get used to it. The hat comes back next time. I'm in the penguin suit for a day, and that's what we're doing here. So I did not remember how to do my hair. It's been so long. So
well, you beat me to the punch. I was going to call it out.
I've decided I may have to just go with the Einstein flow out, let it go. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you can pull it off. I want you to try it, not for Halloween, but just as a regular thing. But I'm really excited to have our guest here today. She's a BCBA, former special education teacher. She's a parent coach and mother of 3. If you're hip and cool and on social media, you might know her as the family behaviorist. Mandy Grass, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited. I'm sure there's a lot of talk we can do about parenting and all that stuff. But first, you mind just giving us a little introduction about who you are and what you do and kind of where you're coming from?
Sure. So you gave the Cliff Notes. I was a special education teacher, and then I ended up at an outplacement school for kids with autism. And that's when I discovered behavior analysis. The story is there was a boy that looked me in the eyes and spit on the floor, and I was like, clean it up. And everybody yelled at me for giving him attention. And that behavior went on extinction. It was gone in 3 days. And I was like, I know nothing. Teach me everything. And so I've been a behavior analyst since 2015, and I have 3 of my own daughters. And then as my kids got to toddler age, a lot of people were like, well, what about this and what about that? And I was like, ooh, I love working with parents and helping them to understand behavior. So that's how my company, my Instagram, my social media was born. And so I've been doing that for about 3 years now, and it's great. I really like it.
That's awesome. And I mean, let's just jump into it. The Family Behaviorist really is, it's pretty huge now. I mean, 700,000 plus people following you on different platforms.
Yeah, it's getting up there for sure.
We want to dive into parenting, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of go into, first and foremost, kind of how you made ABA and taking some kind of nerdy stuff or some stuff that's kind of hard to, be approachable to a general audience. And you really gained a following, and you do a really good job of presenting some, really behavior analytic stuff to people in a really approachable and easy way. So I just want to start by just kind of asking, like, what inspired you to start that platform specifically as a parent coach?
Sure. So I'm a little afraid of the BACB, as I think anybody else who's a behavior analyst is. So like when this idea kind of started to come about, my biggest worry was criticism from the field. My biggest worry was, not being behavior analytic in nature. But I've worked in a public school for 15 years now. And the thing is, it really is a missing piece, right? People think behavior analysts like only deal with autism, or they think that we are on some high horse and not approachable at all because, you need 6 weeks of data. And don't get me wrong, 6 weeks of data absolutely matters, but when we're talking about why Timmy is running across a parking lot to help a parent understand function, even in its most simplistic terms, can make a huge difference. So I just started posting about some of the things that I was dealing with or that students I was working with was dealing with, and it sort of took off from there. I actually have I've been super supportive of other BCBAs that are moms. I got a comment on my Instagram the other day that, like, "Why should we take your advice? You mess it up." Yeah, I do. Like, I don't walk around all day looking for behavior being like, "Oh, I know how to solve that." It happens, and I respond the way that feels natural, and then if a pattern emerges, I'm like, "Ooh, okay, I have to take a different approach." But yeah, so it's been really great. The field has actually been really wonderful other than, one comment battle about illicit versus evoke, there's been minimal criticism.
Yeah, I don't know who that was, but I bet I can guess who that was generally, personality-wise.
Right, and the thing is, like, I was talking about whatever it was, and I was like, "Oh, we want to elicit," and they were battling, and somebody wrote, like, "You're missing the whole point." I was like, "The average parent doesn't care or really need to know the nuanced distinction, right? If we are in a center with a child that has, like, SIB 215 times a day, we're gonna want that distinction, but for the average parent, I don't know that that matters, and not to water down the science, but I think also, why are we not making this accessible to all parents? We are leaving them to, the hands of the gentle parent, and we're just validating every feeling. And I was like, oh, but you're reinforcing it, right? So I think any information is good information.
Yeah, I think it's impressive you've been able to kinda cross that barrier because and maybe it's because we are such a science-based, discipline that people have trouble talking to people outside our science, I'm not sure, but I think when we post something or we see a post on Facebook and we're trying to be helpful or wherever it is, oh, my child is doing this, and we try to give some level of, here's how it could be going, maybe try this and then get some help. These are some resources. And then you have 50 other people saying, nope, that's horrible. Never do that with your child. And so, how did you or did you even have to navigate going through those waters of, how are you legitimate, that sort of thing?
Yes. Oh, this is gonna be a little bit controversial, right? I never
We're
say
here for it.
ABA. Never, not
Yeah.
once. You will never see me say ABA. I do say behavior analytic. I do say an approach based in behavior analysis, but I've never once said ABA, and I won't because it is such a triggering term. I had a girl I went to high school with reach out to me, and she was like, "My daughter's recently diagnosed, but everyone is screaming no ABA." And I was like, "Let me explain to you what ABA is. You're doing it. You're doing it right now. You're doing it every day." Like, so for some reason, I don't know if it's like discrete trial instruction, but like the phrase ABA has been vilified. So I just never say it. And I just talk about understanding the science. And the other thing is, I am completely guilty as I am someone on Instagram, but we are like fed all this information, parent, coach, whatever, is ambiguous. So when I started, there was somebody with a huge following, and like I looked into their credentials, and it was like they took a 40-hour parenting course. And I'm like, or the worst, like, maybe you don't have kids, right? So it's one thing before I had kids to be like, oh my God, you should do da, da, da. And then you have kids and you're like, ah, even when I got my now current job, I work in a public school as a behavior analyst. And in the interview, I was like, listen, the best laid plan is irrelevant without your ability to implement it. So if
Right.
I'm going into a teacher being like, I know if you give this student reinforcement on a 7-minute interval, this is going to go away, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. Like, that's not feasible. So really knowing what are the parents' priorities? How do you get them to understand broad scope? How do you get them to fix one little response? That can be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll say anybody that's listened to anything I've done knows I have no problem with being a little controversial. Now, Kyle, his skin crawls as soon as he hears it, but uh, the general idea that you put out there with the ABA, I think we've almost lost that battle. I think we've lost the terminology because it's become so synonymous with discrete trial training that that is all it is to people. And I've mentioned it in several episodes now, but I wrote a parent paper while I was getting my doctorate. And it was just a, hey, here's some things you can get started on before you can get fine services or while you're on a wait list. And the editor of the parenting magazine came back and immediately said, as long as you write in here, this is just for small children under the age of whatever with autism, then we'll publish it. And I said, I can't do it. And so I almost feel like giving up on that, as long as you're not giving up on behavior analysis and the science, is not as controversial as some may think it is.
Well, along those lines, I do professional developments for teachers, and an ABA agency had me in to talk to their parents, which was a little bit weird for me because I'm not normally presenting to other behavior analysts, and so part of my presentation does talk about social stories, and so I was like, all right. Well, normally there's not other BCBAs in the room. This one's a little controversial. However, and I think it's okay to be like, listen, maybe it's not completely empirically supported, but when does previewing ever hurt, right? So just to put that information out there and give people enough information to make their own decisions.
Yeah, and as a model, conceptualizing it in behavioral analytic terms, it's hard to say, "Oh, you should never do a social story." The problem tends to be, "Okay, here's a social story. Now you're set. Go ahead, go
Right.
off
Or
and
you
live your."
only do a
Yeah,
social story,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you're using a social story to explain a DRL, it can be really helpful.
yeah.
Was there like a moment that you were like, okay, I'm doing this, and like suddenly there was like one post or like one, something happened that you're like, oh, this is kind of blowing up.
So I got a little bit lucky. I started off posting on TikTok because Instagram felt like it was my friends and I was like worried about the judgment. And I made this post about tone. So I had a teacher who came to me once and was like, I followed your behavior plan to a T. And in fact, she had written every single thing she had said to the student down. And she was like, I'm doing it and it's not working. I was like, listen, I screw up. Maybe it's not. And I went and watched her and like, she was incredibly aggressive in her tone. She's like, what do you need from me? And I was like, oh, I don't know why he's not doing that. Okay. So I made a post about that and it like blew up. So then I was like, oh, okay. And then from there, it's been really intermittent things. Another video that's done really well um, is hitting. So like all these gentle parenting perspective can be like, we don't hit. And my post was like, totally, we don't. What do we do? Where's the replacement behavior? Instead of holding our kids' hands and saying, we don't hit, how are we teaching them to express that anger? Are we working on naming their feeling? Are we working on clenching their fists and stomping their feet? Like all of those sort of things. So that has sometimes been a light bulb moment for people.
And I feel like I've seen other folks online, try to address things similar, like similar topics, but there's just like a point where they're like, and that's called differential reinforcement, and here's why. And then I feel like there's a point where we kind of lose people, and then I feel like you do a really good job of broaching it in a way that's so approachable that you don't even know that you're being fed something that's like empirically based and a lot of science backing it. Like differential reinforcement can be used to do a lot of things. We're just talking about hitting, and here's how this works. It, it's do you feel like it's the humor that you involve in it, or is it just that like so many people are parents and so we just kind of share that same struggle together, or what do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you put something in place that makes like a lot of logical sense, people are like, oh, and then again, differential reinforcement's a great one. I've done posts about like the four most popular differential reinforcements I use. So, for example, a DRO. I had a student who was in second grade who was still having accidents. So, we put a DRO in place for that where she was reinforced at noon for the absence of an accident and at the end of the day. However, one particular day she had a colossal tantrum, like room destroying tantrum, and the bell went off and she looked at her teacher and was like, "Where's my candy?" And her teacher looked at me and I was like, she gets the candy. I understand the room's destroyed, but like also she didn't have an accident. So little bit of a high
Yeah.
five, right? But that's a really great opportunity to talk about the downfalls of a DRO where like you can accidentally reinforce other things and also talk about you have to prioritize behavior change. Yes, we want to work on all of these things, but how do we do that at the same time?
Yeah, I think my downfall is that I hear Dero and I'm like, well, technically it's the avoidance of the loss of the reinforcer. And
So you're one of those guys, you lose people.
I will lose people if I get to go down my rabbit hole, but I know no one's interested, so I just stop myself.
Yeah, so I really just tried to, like, make it really clear, like, if we're talking about function and I'm gonna be really, really basic about it, and talking about, like, how do we determine function? Well, and I'm like, just look for patterns, but to that point where we talk about starting all of this, even in my public school job, sometimes I'll go in and there's a super egregious behavior, and I will put like a support plan in place while we're collecting data for the FBA. People need something. And sometimes behavior analysts can be like, great, I'll be back in 6 weeks. And you have a teacher or a parent who's drowning and can't wait 6 weeks. And from my lens, if I don't give you a little bit, you might actually make it worse. So why don't I help you to understand this in the most basic terms so we can at least head in the right direction?
Yeah, it seems like you have to have that fine line of prevention as much as possible, yet if you're just preventing it from occurring, you're not changing the contingencies involved. You're not actually changing the behavior, you're just preventing it. And so we're going to prevent it for now or minimize it, but it still has to be in place and able to shape it and change it. And that has been very hard for caregivers and families to understand sometimes when you're trying to explain that this isn't just to get rid of it today, it's for the long term, to really address this issue.
Shaping, right? All the time we talk about a kid who's throwing a tantrum because he wants the blue cup. And I'm like, okay, well, first we're going to teach him to request the blue cup. And then, you have a parent being like, they can't get whatever they want ever. And I was like, no, right? But now we've replaced, then we work on tolerating. And also, we're not going to go to, you can have the blue cup once every 2 weeks. We're going to be like, first have your milk in the yellow and your water in the blue. And so, really teaching people how to do that incrementally, and not lose sight of like, what is our first step? Because people want a magic wand, and we know that rarely exists.
Do you ever get you talked about some of the hate comments that you got, or not the hate comments, but maybe some criticisms. Do you get a lot of criticisms or like people blowing up the DMs, kind of like, this is all wrong, or trying to throw you under the bus?
I really don't. And in fact, my friend was like, it's weird that you don't get more hate. And I was like, it is kind of weird. I don't know. In general, I have to say people have been so kind. But the thing is, like, I did a post about a DRL for swearing, right? For a kid with potty talk. And the next week, I got 6 DMs being like, oh, shit, that worked. And I get a lot of like, what you're saying is not rocket science. It's like the simplest tweak and it makes a world of difference. So I think one of the things that I really focus on is like, what can you do right now? Not this like, get down on their level and make them feel loved. And in 6 years, it probably won't happen. It's like, what can you start doing tomorrow that you will at least see some sort of measurable change, even if it's incremental?
Anybody trying to branch out and become sort of like an ABA influencer in a way, or like, BCBA's educators, parent coaches who want to grow on social media, like I feel, even doing this platform, like you kind of addressed it earlier. Like I want ABA when Googled to be a bunch of other things besides just kind of one thing like it is right now. And so that's why we have guests on that do all sorts of, different facets of the field and things like that. What advice do you have to folks like me who are trying to get get the word out there, and kind of influence the masses in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think as relatable as you can be, as much as you can talk about real things that are happening, right? Like center-based behaviors are very different than the thing the parent is seeing in the home. And again, I think sometimes because we have the background to change these like incredibly severe behaviors, it's sort of like, well, yeah, you don't get this. And again, just starting from step one, right? What is the little thing that a teacher or a parent can do that can be really helpful? I had a student who would escape to the nurse all the time. And the teacher was like, every time he puts his head down, I let him go to the nurse. And I was like, he's putting his head down to leave your room, right? So for him, it was like, okay, let's do 3 predetermined nurses visits. We're going to meet the need to get the attention from the nurse, and we're going to make them slightly inconvenient so that he can decide if he really needs to go to the nurse. I had a student who would get kicked out of class every time he had a hat on. I was like, we can use a delayed consequence here. He's wearing the hat to get kicked out, right? So helping people to understand that while also we want to hold that, make sure there's a consequence, that kind of mentality as well.
Yeah, it's interesting the crossover into like the adult world too, because you're talking going to the school nurse to get out of classroom time, and we're dealing with adults possibly often like swallowing dangerous items in order to go to the hospital for the reinforcement there. And so it's like, okay, how about we just set you up with a greeter job at the hospital, and now there's no more need to do this in the first place.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And what does that look like long term? And how do we, proactively, but to your point before, not avoid, but replace and shape and do that incrementally?
I will say the other podcasts we have going on, it's outside of the company a little bit. It's just the idea is like the how to share our science, more of the science itself with society. And that one, I we just know that we're gonna get all the hate. We're gonna get all the messages. And so we just hide it from Kyle so he doesn't feel discouraged and keep moving forward on that one.
Well, it's so funny. You guys are worried about hate from the public. I'm worried about hate from the BCBAs, right? So
Yeah.
someone was like, we have a Connecticut conference here called CTABA. I'm part of that group. And they're like, you should be a speaker there. I was like, they're never going to ask me to speak there. Like, I am not like scientific enough. Like, that's not, nobody's going to be like, could you please speak to other BCBAs? But I will say other BCBAs are like, but this is what we need. And like to know how to talk to parents and to know how to not be like, listen, it's a, this is the reinforcement and this is the structure. And I know you have 3 other kids, but you really need to do this. It's like they can't, right? So what can we do that helps?
Yeah. And also something you said earlier about doing this and then having your own children. And my wife and I find all the time, she's also a behavior analyst, and it's constantly, all right, we're assessing it. Do we need to create an intervention? Are we doing this? And like half the time it's, no, if we just let this go and the natural consequences will be fine. But now we're overanalyzing. It is very different to do for your own children.
Right, exactly. And again, that's where I got a little bit of hate, but I was like, it happens to me too, right? For example, I have not my daughter will not open the shades in her room. We've worked on it for like 4 years. There's no amount of reinforcement. I have not hit that one hard enough. I give it up. Let's work on something else. Right? Let's go work on the homework battle or whatever.
I do that with my wife because she just walks around turning all the lights off, and I'm like, nope, we need to not be vampires. So I try to shape that, but it doesn't work. And she's on here listening right now, is why I'm calling her out. So
Right. And you know what? If in that case I am not a good behavior analyst, all right? Like there are certain you have to prioritize the behaviors for change, right?
now she did get very good at shaping my behavior of doing, the dishes before going and relaxing and that sort of thing. So she may be a better behavior analyst than I am, really.
Parents always say, like, I know you have me on a behavior plan. I was like, not a successful one, clearly. So
My wife, we have 4 kids. 2 are homeschooled at home. Actually, as I left, my daughter was putting her star on your star chart because my wife finds that very helpful. She's working for, it's not a Labubu. Everyone's talking about Labubus. Taylor, you're listening. It's not a Labubu, but it's like one. It's like a knockoff Labubu, but it's one that she wanted. But she's doing that. But yeah, it is like, you know, my wife homeschools at home. She'll call me. This is really frustrating. Like something's happening. Can you fix this? And it's like, it's my own kids. Like I can try, but that dual relationship's gonna play in really quick, and I'm gonna reinforce stuff that we shouldn't be because I just want they just look cute, and it's really hard to be objective sometimes.
you say your wife's using my star chart,
Yeah, she is. Yeah,
my like very fancy Word document star chart. That's the other
you
thing.
know
Like, I'm not the colored one or the Word one.
the colored one. Yeah,
So that one is fancier. But, like, it's funny, like, my visual schedules are, like, I take a picture and I put them in Word. I probably should be more well-versed at Canva, but that's part of it too, like, the simplest answer is sometimes the right answer, like, just make it accessible.
yeah, and I think there's something too about not that she doesn't believe what I'm saying, but there is something to yeah. I mean, I would never sit there and be like, "Well, you just reinforced it," like that would not go well, between me and her. And so we do have to approach it like as a team. Uh, and then as we're approaching as a team, I'm at work all day. She's at home. She's experiencing contingencies that I don't get to experience. And so like her baseline's way different, by the time I come home. And so I come in and like, yeah, just do this and this and this. It's really nice having like an objective third party who can just be like, this is something that could work. And then her and I saying, let's work on this together because this is something that's out there. I know that it's peer reviewed. I know it's evidence based. Let's just do it and see what happens. As opposed to assessing it ourselves and then it not working and then just being it's very exhausting doing behavior plans on your own with your own kids.
So my partner was like my 4-year-old was being particularly like whiny, right? And I was like getting on her level, whatever, and he was like, I think I would have just sent my kid to their room. And granted, I was not going to do that, but I was like, the point you're making is I'm giving this a lot of attention. And so once he said that, I was like, ooh, oh, touche. Okay, Marley, I'll be happy to talk to you when you've hung up your backpack, right? And I wait out that extinction burst. So, yeah, when you're in it, you can't see all those variables. I made a post once that was like, try not to say the word calm. It's not measurable. And my best friend DM'd me. She's like, you say that all the time. I was like, yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
Oh, yeah, 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 when you're c w calm down, like, when you're calm, I'll talk to you, like, try telling that to a 13-year-old, that's not gonna go very well.
I am
Um,
calm, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, we've entered the 13s, and that's a fun one with my son, it's just always you never know which version of him you're gonna get. He's always lovely, but, one version of him wants to talk to you and hang out, and another version does not. And he'll let you know either
one
way,
of, uh
so
one of my kids is a picky eater, and we're making a lot of pasta, and I finally sat down and I was like, "So we're gonna put a contingency in place. You can have pasta once a week. Let's talk about the other things that are accessible." But again, like, when you're reactive and frustrated by that, that for me is what happened, and I think that's what parents can relate to is, like, then it's like, "Okay, I've now been frustrated with this 2 weeks in a row," and that's where I'm like, "I gotta solve this." And so in general, even that's the type of BCBA I am. Like, I am a little bit more like, what can we do in this moment? How do we fix a part of this? Whatever. Obviously, also analyzing the data, but there's an element, especially in the public school, where you can walk in and like that function is clear. Um, I had a student once, a kindergartner. I'm talking to him, and I turn and talk to his friend, and he gets up and he kicks me. And of course, I'm like, that stopped. And I was like, it really seems like you wanted my attention. You can tap my shoulder. We're gonna try it right now. I'm gonna talk to you, and I'm gonna talk to your friend. You're gonna tap my shoulder. He proceeded to tap my shoulder, 50 times the next 20 minutes. But okay, like that, we didn't need an entire report to tell us what was going on there. I knew very clearly what was going on there.
Yeah, I had one of those situations where the first child I was undergrad working in an autism center, and it was escape maintained to the max, and she could vomit on my hands and on command, and then spit in my eye and hit it every time. She was perfect aim, and I'm like, this is obvious, but I've never done this before. What do I do about it? Like as soon as there's a demand, and so it went very well, but looking back, I'm like, I wish I would have had even a little bit of knowledge at that point because I could have done so much better too. But it also shows you that you don't have to do it perfectly, and hopefully that's what parents are getting out of this a lot of the time is you don't have to be perfect, and it should still work as long as you're fairly consistent in your imperfection.
So I made a post the other day that was like 5 things I would tell you as a behavior analyst if I'm not afraid to hurt your feelings. And one of them, the second one was like, inconsistent responding is the worst thing you can do. And I was like, I say that as a parent who responds inconsistently. I was like, but intermittently reinforcing, if you're going to say yes immediately. Waiting till minute 25, at that point, ride it out, right? But that is going to make it worse for you long term.
what are some of the most common parenting challenges that you encounter, like, as you interact with parents, as consult with families?
I think like attention maintained behaviors. Again, we've been inundated with like if a kid is having a particularly difficult moment, like don't leave them. I was working with a parent the other day. She was like, he screamed at me to leave, but like I know I'm not supposed to. And I was like, wait, he told you to leave. Like, let's respect that. And us again kind of operate in these extremes of like, um, I need to be there for them. I need to like our parents left us to deal with our feelings alone. And I was like, okay, but also we're teaching them to do this. And so we want to be mindful of what we want to teach. I think the biggest thing that people have taken away on Instagram is replacement behavior. Like, what do we want them to do instead? And then teaching that and reinforcing that. All of those sort of things come up a lot.
Is that an easy concept to kinda to communicate? Because I feel like a lot of, whenever I'm trying to communicate the idea of a replacement behavior, I feel like and it's usually group home staff, that's generally who I work with, but they're like, "But no, we want no behavior to equal that consequence." And it's hard for me to sometimes say like, "Well, like, there needs to be an appropriate way to escape things. We don't want this person just to learn to endure aversive situations all the time, like, that's not our goal here." Is that a hard concept at all, or does that, like, click with parents?
So yes and no. One really good example of this is I was working with a family where the daughter was like stealing soda all the time. And they're like, what do we do? Like, we can hide the soda. I was like, listen, you can hide the soda, but when you bring the soda back, she's going to steal it again. It's access maintained, and stealing gets access 100% of the time. I was like, so you're going to want to work on requesting, and requesting is going to have to elicit access 100% of the time because this does. And then we work on shaping it. But we need them to learn that, like, this way also gets my needs met. And then we can work on finding that balance. So Yes and no. I will say, like, last week, I had this couple, and this dad is like, "I know that I'm not doing this right. I know it's getting worse." And so that is a really cool part when people are like, "Listen, in my head is like, you should obey because I said so, and I know it's not working, and what do I do?" And so when I explain the concept and, like, give these examples, I would say probably, like, 95% of the time, people are like, "Ah, all right, that makes sense. Now what do we do?"
And it seems like what's out there for everybody is one end of the spectrum or the other. There's no, down the middle, because parenting isn't either being overly gentle or being overly harsh. It is, you can go down that middle lane, hopefully learn some skills to shape things effectively. But we're not saying don't feel these emotions or don't talk about them, but react to them appropriately and use them to your advantage, as we have as a species learned to do. Otherwise, you're going to be in a situation where you're not managing them, or you're bottling it up and then having issues that way as well. And so
Yeah,
it's just strange how somehow it's got to be one or the other. It can't just be a, how about we just learn how to effectively, handle these things.
yeah, absolutely. I got a DM the other day and someone sent me something another parent coach posted that was like, don't give praise. Because if you give praise, you're teaching them that every time you didn't give praise, their behavior's terrible. And I was like, okay, so if your boss tells you you did a really good job on a report, do you think every other report you wrote was terrible? Like, praise, reinforcement punch, like these are ways in which to change behavior. Now, sure, some anxious people might be like, oh no, but in general, you're like, "Ooh, what did I do on that report that was so good? I'm going to try that again." Right.
Yeah. Like, I've seen one that was like, "Never do timeout." Like, "Oh, okay." Maybe. And then another one, me and my wife were just laughing because another one was like, the answer was always timeout. Like, here's how you do timeout, and it's for every behavior possible. Like, well, that's not true either. So there's a lot of information out there, and it's confusing as I've a master's in ABA, but like as someone, if I didn't have that educational background, it would be very confusing, kind of like traversing the internet and just seeing like even conflicting recommendations from different, so-called professionals.
And the credentials. So I have a spiel, obviously. I say, "My name is Mandy Grass, and I'm a behavior analyst and parent coach."
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if I do an Ask Me Anything, people are like, "You need to stop saying that." I was like, well, A, I need you to know who I am. And B, I want you to know the credentials and I want you to know them off the rip because, like, those credentials mean something to me. I am not just like, hey, I have 3 kids. I'm a mom influencer. Listen to how I cut the sandwich cute. No, this is what I do for a living. This is not just my children, it's the hundreds of children I've worked with. Nothing you're gonna come to me with I haven't seen. I promise. So, like, let's talk about what that actually looks like.
So is that how you get some of your content then, is just seeing what others are putting out there that's not necessarily science based and trying to talk about it in a behavior analytic,
So, no.
lens?
And you had said this earlier. You know how on TikTok or Instagram you can like take someone's video and like respond. I've never, ever, ever done any of that. I don't. That's not my deal. I'm not gonna like come in and be like, this is why this is wrong. Nope. So like I am very much not a like preaching, not a like this is better. The way that I get my content is just my life. Like the kids, my own children, my friends' children. Like if we're out and about every weekend, I end up with like 10, like, oh, make a content about this, make a content about that. Because they're just things that are naturally happening. I don't really consume a ton more parenting content myself other than what's like spoon fed to me. Um, I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope for me because I do get a little bit like, that doesn't totally make sense. So instead, I just really stick to like what I know and what I see and what like actionable steps can I give people.
When I became a BCBA, um, my or sorry, when I became a parent, my family trainings changed so drastically because I went in so confidently, as a childless, just fresh BCBA, and like, hey, just do this, this, and this. Things are gonna be better. See ya. I'm out of here. Um, and then once I had kids, especially once I had two, at two was I was like losing sleep. That became very stressful and very difficult. And I remember doing a parent training and be like, here's a good recommendation. However, I know that you're a single mom getting her master's degree right now and have 3 kids, and 2 of them are on the spectrum. So, what do you think? You know, it became very, empathetic, I think, just by nature of, my own experience.
I think sometimes the parenting content, like maybe it's somebody who just has one kid, or you're a content creator, or it can be very preachy. And I try my I mean, I would, even when someone's like, "You're a parenting expert," I was like, "Oh, don't say that." Like, I just happen to like have some behavior background. Like, all of that makes me super uncomfortable. I love talking about behavior, but I just like solving problems. So, like, bed. Okay, here are 4 different ways. Which one sounds reasonable to you? Which one's most comfortable to you? All right, this is how we're gonna do it. Like today, I met with this family for an hour, and we talked about a variety of things. In the last 10 minutes, I was like, "Okay, this seems to be the most socially significant. This one's impacting." So we're gonna be mindful of all the responses we talked about, but we're gonna, like, hit this one hard with a plan. And, like, again, it makes such a difference for people, even just the free content that I post, that, like, if I can help somebody make a minor change in their home that's like, "Oh my god, I'm not on eggshells anymore," a million times over, that's worth it.
And without worrying about the vernacular, making sure like everything, and I think that's one thing too that I kind of have changed. Like I am very comfortable using the word reward instead of reinforcer. Like that just has become a thing because I use the word reinforcer and dad's got a glazed over look on his face already. You know, like I've noticed that you in your post do a really good job of kind of walking a really good line where you're using words that are very approachable, very, easy to understand, but also not shifting from the scientific literature, and I think it's really, really cool how you navigate that line and walk it, so that's a very approachable thing for families to have under their tool belt for sure.
I still have flashbacks to grad school when one professor would say learned or unlearned and the other would say conditioned, unconditioned. And if you didn't get it right for the right professor, you were failing. And so I don't know how good I am at that.
Well, even the evoke elicit thing, that was specifically on some of our tests, and there were co-instructors in my program that would use those kind of interchangeably. And what's the other one? Frequency and rate. Like that was a thing where I was like, people were using them interchangeably, but there was technically a different definition.
I'll just weigh in there that frequency doesn't make sense without time. So it has to be rate. It all is rate. What does frequency matter if it's not over a period of time?
Okay, okay, Dr. Sparks,
Well, to
thank
that
you.
point, I failed the BCBA exam twice too, so, like, no worries, we could go at this all day, like, it's fine.
As we kind of round out our time here, is there a good place? I mean, obviously your social media, but is there a good place that people can find you to ask about services or just kind of say like, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. Can I hit you up about something?"
Yeah, absolutely. My Instagram is at the Family Behaviorist. I'm on TikTok technically as well. And then my website, thefamilybehaviorist.com. It's lots of cool stuff. We do some webinars. We're launching some new stuff in the next few weeks that we're really excited about. And coaching. We can always do independent coaching.
Well, Mandy Grass, she's a BCBA, formal special education teacher, parent coach, and the family behaviorist on social media. Mandy, thanks so much for joining us today, and we hope to have you back sometime.
Thanks for having me.